also to address these changes to become climate resilient. Uh, and a climate resilient is actually driven by a timely and effective actions which are enabled by the good governance, sufficient finances, knowledge and capacity building, and catalyzing the conditions which are actually favorable to become a climate resilient nations. So let's have a quick look on how the climate parameters, our physical indicator, are unfolding in Pakistan. I'm going to share with some facts, scientific evidence about the temperature and precipitation and the changes that we have experienced in our large-scale circulation or regional circulation systems. What you see here, this is a temperature anomaly for the time period of 1978 to 2021. And if you look at this, so we are almost after 1998, we are living in a warmer regime with respect to the temperature. So the year 2016 has been worldwide the strongest year ever recorded, strongest and the warmest year recorded on record. And still last year, 2021 have been also. So if you look at the anomaly, temperature anomaly, we are a little ahead of the rest of global average. So that means, we are heading towards a warmer climate regime. And if you look at the precipitation changes, so they are not consistent. There are huge interannual variability, but so there are episodic behaviors which might be linked to the large-scale circulation, and so which consist of La Nina and the El Nino. So when we have La Nina conditions, we have excessive rains, and when we have El Nino conditions, then we have relatively dry periods. So uh, you see, there is no consistent pattern, but interannual variability. Some years we have surplus rain, and some years we have uh, relatively shorter rains. So we tried to find out how this changes in precipitation regime of Pakistan is going to impact the monsoon pattern in Pakistan. This is the map is showing the spatial shift in monsoon basin, basically. So we only took mainly the area within the gray bar, which we call monsoon basin, and the circles with plus and minus sign. These are actually the meteorological station by Pakistan Meteorological Department. And the plus sign is showing that the increase in rainfall over the selected time period, and the minus mean the negative trend in this over these points. So if you look at the red line, which is actually for the recent decade, almost decade, it's not a decade. So we have a slightly southward shift in the monsoon basin or monsoon regime of Pakistan. So we took two thresholds, one for 2.5 millimeter per day. This is by definition, it's considered as a rainy day by PMG. So in the left panel and the right panel, it's relatively moderate rain events, so 4 millimeter per day. So in case of 4 millimeter per day, we do see shrinkage in the heavy rainfall area. So if you look at the number of rain even during the monsoon rainfall, so the bars are actually the total rainfall during the respective years, but the yellow line is actually the total number of rainfall events based on this criteria over the Pakistan. If you look at this, so hardly there is any significant change in precipitation with respect when you talk about the total rainfall. But if you look at the yellow line, that tells you there has been a significant decrease in the incident in number of total rainy days. So that means that gives us an indication that although there is no significant change in total rainfall in Pakistan during monsoon, but the rains have been intensified because the number of days has been significantly reduced. If you look at almost 55%. Similarly, then we try to look what if the number is reduced, whether there is a temporal shift. If the monsoon is impacted, so there should be some shift towards the post-monsoon as well. So then we'd look for the post-monsoon season. And there has, if you look at, again, the yellow line, that is showing a steady increase in the number of rain events. So that means it's not just the spatial shift in the monsoon, but also the temporal shift has been there. So it's slightly shifted towards the post-monsoon season. Okay, so what you see here, this is last year we have this seasonal South Asian Seasonal Climate Outlook Forum. They have published this forecast for this year 2022 monsoon back in April 27, 2022. And they have predicted actually in some part of the Pakistan, Western Balochistan, and Western KP region, more than 70% above normal rainfall. But in fact, we have experienced that much of ranging from 50 to up to 784% more rainfall in some part of Pakistan. So they're termed as monster monsoon cycle in Pakistan, and we experience a lot of devastation because of this. So let me give you some glimpses how the climate change impacts the agriculture sector. Very important. When we have excessive heat, and the drought conditions, we have crop failure, we have crop yield loss, we have physical damages to crop, we have new type of pests and diseases, and loss of natural resources removes habitats and food for the beneficial insects, dries up water resources, etc. So on the other hand, when we have surplus rains in the floods, then we have different type of the impacts, increased difficulty of planting the next crop, raised flood risk crops, physical damage also, and the new type of pests and diseases also spreading physically and also results in a huge crop yields. So there is another fundamental aspect which has been largely ignored in this part of the world. This is how the air quality or air pollution is actually impacting the agriculture sector. If you look at Pakistan is actually one of the most country with the poor, very bad air quality conditions. And if you look at how that air pollution, particularly ozone concentrations, ozone has a double impact. It's an air pollutant as well, but it also a greenhouse gas as well. I'm talking about the tropospheric ozone, which is referred as a bad ozone. So if you look at this, the Southwest and Central Asia, so most of the losses will be increased for all the crop types, mainly wheat, rice, maize, and soybeans in this part of the world. So according to recent report from IPCC, they have listed the climate impacts and the risk in the Asia. So heat waves across the Asia is going to be very frequent, which we have already experienced. Droughts in arid and semi-arid areas of the West, Central, and South Asian region, floods in monsoon region in Southeast Asia and East Asia, glacier melting in Hindu Kush, Himalaya region, and so on. And then there are certain sectors and impacts which are with very high confidence of scientific understanding that is going to help, for instance, ecosystems with loss of habitat for flora and fauna, massive wildfires during heat waves are going to further exacerbate this impact. Cryosphere has gone through substantial impacts, like we having experienced a lot of GLOFs, glacier melting, and so on. Cities and settlements, migration, climate-induced migration is going to be another challenge for this Asian region. Energy and the food sector is largely hampered by the demand because of global warming and climate change-induced changes. Okay, climate change is indisputable reality, and we are the sufferer, and we are very much vulnerable, and we have experienced that much devastated impacts in Pakistan, so that the denial is. So we have frequent heat waves and droughts in Pakistan. The frequency and the loss has increased manifolds in Pakistan. GLOFs, during just the summer of last year, we have experienced 30 GLOFs events in northern region of Pakistan, and more than 3,000 glacial. We're having a long history of devastating monsoon flood, 2010 super flood and the monster monsoon flood of 2020. So then we have hit the tipping point for various crops, mainly the major staple crops of Pakistan, like rice and wheat, and also for the cotton. We have already hit the tipping point when we talk about the temperature in Pakistan. So we are very much convinced the climate change is reality, and we are the most affected one in this, mainly because of resilient. So what is actually the way forward? The immediate thing which comes into my mind is that being proactive rather than reactive. So use of advanced technologies to address these challenges for each sector, producing evidence for effective action. For instance, if you don't know your uh, impact, the magnitude, the spatio-temporal boundaries of these impacts, you are unable to devise any effective solution, and also the cost-effective one as well. Better risk awareness among the masses and all the stakeholders. They need to know how big are the challenge we are facing right away. Regional partnership and learning to learning from each other's experience and the knowledge and expertise. Disaster risk reduction should be there, and the more focus or emphasis should be on the disaster preparedness rather than a reactive approach to disaster management. Willingness to act from all stakeholders. That is a huge barrier to effective action. Identification of barriers and constraints towards effective and the timely action. This is another biggest challenge in our local scenario. So what are actually the barriers? There are two which comes into my mind are incompetent governance and inadequate evidence to the prioritized action. Because if you do unable to understand your problem in the spatial and temporal context, it's cross-sectional uh, characteristics. So you are unable to devise an effective solution. And equally important is incompetent governance, which might be dependent on various parameters like political fame or defame. Governments are reluctant to take actions. Lack of capacity is the biggest challenge. The panelists have already discussed in the forenoon session. Lack of adequate policies, lack of law enforcement, uneven resource distribution, and the financial constraints in Pakistan case is actually the biggest barrier towards climate action. Okay, so for instance, climate smart agriculture can give you a certain aspect, can have effective use of resources. So IoT-based sensor network to monitor and where needed fertilizers in the past can be effectively used. Ecosystem-based, nature-based solution that has been very famous term nowadays globally. So early warning system, which are very much needed as a part of disaster preparedness, and urban blue-green infrastructures. And the important thing is that sustainable development, our all development goals should be aligned to the SDGs. There's no way out aligning them according to the SDGs. So NUST has taken certain initiatives, being a prime university of the country. So for instance, I'm not going to in further details, but just I'm going to share with you some glimpses that we try to find the address carbon emission and the forest management. We develop a system which is named drops that can tell you whenever, where you have installed this system in the real time with the time lapse of 20 seconds, the progress. Okay, some colleagues from wheat rust disease detection by using artificial intelligence. Multi-step approach for optically active and inactive water quality parameter by using satellite observations, and bacterial prediction using Internet of Things and machine learning. So a semi-automated system for glove susceptibility, a surge model has been already there. So we can predict the susceptibility of glacial lakes, which are very susceptible to the glove event. And we can have a risk assessment for purpose in case of those glove events. So there's a certain list that in our capacity, we are trying to build a greenhouse gas database And not only the greenhouse gases, but also the other gases, like I mentioned, the tropospheric ozone and the black carbon and other aerosols as well. We have introduced an idea of CO2 bin to sequester CO2 from indoor spaces. Most of you have might seen outside. There's a stall and the prototype is actually there. We have introduced an idea of CO2 arrestor, which is a retrofitting solution for old cars that can fit in your trunk of your car, and you can partially sequester CO2 coming out of the tailpipe. Then we have hybrid solar water heater system, again, retrofitting solution for existing infrastructure to partially provide you the warm water. Catalytic converters for motorcycles, because the motorcycles are big polluters. A take-home message. So climate change is causing huge toll on Pakistan's economy. These statistics are not actually updated because that was back in 2017. The future cost of climate impacts is estimated between $6 billion to 14 billion years for the next 40 years. So now you all know it has been changed. So estimates have been increased manifolds. So the important take-home message is that we should get rid of this mess, this myth that someone else will do for us. No, this is our crisis and we are the most vulnerable. So we have to do it and do it yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Coker. Now we invite Mr. Ali Tokir Sheikh for his keynote address. Mr. Ali Tokir Sheikh is, he was founding director and CEO of Leadership for Environment and Development Lead Pakistan for over 2 decades and currently serving as the climate change senior advisor at the World Bank. So please.
in technology. But please bear with me. I think I'll be all right speaking to you without the help of slides if it cannot be used. सबसे पहले तो मुझे ये इजाज़त दीजिए डॉक्टर खोखर से बात करने की। आपने तो दरिया को कुएं में बंद कर दिया। इतनी कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव आपकी स्लाइड थी। आई फील वेरी स्मॉल, हालांकि मैं एक पेडेस्टल पे खड़ा हूँ। आपने माशाल्लाह से बहुत कॉम्प्रिहेंसिवली रेंज ऑफ इश्यूज को कवर किया। और जहाँ पे आपकी रिकमेंडेशंस आ रही थी, जहाँ पे कंक्लूड कर रहे थे आप कि हमें प्रोएक्टिव होने की ज़रूरत है रिएक्टिव होने की बजाय, एंड range of actions that we need to take, including partnerships, and that provides me a good entry point to frame my presentation. मगर मुझे इजाज़त दीजिए कि आपकी स्लाइड नंबर 1 पे थोड़ा सा रिएक्ट कर सकूं। और स्लाइड 1 दो हिस्सों में डिवाइड थी। एक तरफ उसके पॉपुलेशन थी कि कैसे 0.8 या 0.9 बिलियन से वो स्टार्ट हुई और अब कहाँ पे है, और दूसरी तरफ मिशंस में आईपीसीसी की असेसमेंट रिपोर्ट्स की तरफ से प्रोजेक्शंस थी। इज दैट राइट डॉक्टर? ये लगाने की जरूरत नहीं है ना, थैंक यू। अब रिग्रेटिवली इन दो का आपस में लिंक नहीं है। मैं सिर्फ उसी तक बात करके अपने मेन टॉपिक की तरफ आना चाहता हूँ। More people does not necessarily mean more emissions. Emissions is a function of lifestyles. तो वेस्टर्न कंट्रीज में कम पॉपुलेशन के साथ भी इमिशन लेवल बहुत हाई हैं। हमारे यहाँ मैंने सुना कि 45,000 बच्चे रोजाना पैदा होते हैं, तो हमारा इमिशन लेवल वो नहीं है। और कहने को आईपीसीसी साइंस है, in reality it is in many ways a political science also, because sovereigns, 180 or 98 countries have signed up to it. They review it and they can object to anything, and unless there is a consensus, it's not signed off. And early on, the very first IPCC assessment report बन रही थी, तो अमेरिकन एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन जो थी उस जमाने में वो थे कैथोलिक, एंड दे वर अगेंस्ट पॉपुलेशन कंट्रोल। उन्होंने कहा था कि आईपीसीसी रिपोर्ट में आप हर चीज़ डाल सकते हैं, पॉपुलेशन नहीं डाल सकते। So if you look at assessment report 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, none of them carries any discussion or discourse on population, as if it does not exist as an issue. Last assessment report में population is covered, but as a subheading under health, and that's a very good start. Likewise, there has been a lacuna in IPCC reports on loss and damage. More advanced countries were very reluctant to allow developing countries invoke the Rio principle of shared but differentiated responsibility. That would have resulted that the polluters must pay, and therefore a question of attribution or retribution may have come in shape of loss and damage. So loss and damage was a big word. No, even though you did not cover, Dr. Saab, loss and damage, you would have also done an excellent job on this, but on those two issues, I'm conscious. एक बायस और भी है उसका जिसका मैं जिक्र करना चाहता हूँ. This is a report by high priests of science from reputed journals, and typically it has two problems. One problem is that high priests of science are not found in developing countries. हमारे यहाँ डोनर्स की रिपोर्ट्स होंगी, कंट्री की रिपोर्ट्स होंगी, स्टूडेंट्स के डिसर्टेशंस होंगे, इस किस्म की चीज़ होगी. रेफरीड रिसर्च टिपिकली डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज में नहीं है, और लिहाजा उनके पर्सपेक्टिव्स और उनकी अपनी रिसर्च बहुत कम आती है. और जो वहाँ का जो नॉर्दर्न उसका बायस है या टिल्ट है, टिल्ट कहना चाहिए बायस की बजाय, दैट इज़ वेरी अंडरस्टैंडेबल. तो उसका एक फ़र्क और भी पड़ता है. जितनी देर में रेफरीड साइंस छपती है और आईपीसीसी में आती है, वो ऑलरेडी 5 या 7 साल पुरानी होती है. और हमारे यहाँ हमारे साइंटिस्ट को, हमारे प्रोफेसर को, हमारे स्टूडेंट्स को, कम्युनिटी एक्टिविस्ट को, कम्युनिटीज़ को बहुत साल पहले जो चीज़ें मैंने टच नहीं करके कुछ चीज़ चेक कर लीजिए, बहुत साल पहले जो वो प्रोसेसेस देख रहे होते हैं, वो अभी साइंटिफिक उनकी वैलिडेशन नहीं होती. Therefore, our knowledge of science is sometimes ये नहीं लगा हुआ, ये लगा लेते हैं, मेरा ख्याल है ये हुआ होगा। चले, I think, Dr. Sahab, I wanted to commend you on this. And population I wanted to mention in particular because we, we have a very high population growth rate. And my concern is that this migration to urban areas because of degraded ecosystems and limited carrying capacity. शहरों में जाके हमारी वल्नरेबिलिटी भी बहुत बढ़ती है और emission लेवल भी बहुत बढ़ते हैं. So there's a trend of accelerated growth. Now I want to cover these issues very quickly with you. My topic is extremely limited, but very rewarding. और मैंने खुद उनसे रिक्वेस्ट की थी, उन्होंने कुछ एक्शन ओरिएंटेशन की थी, तो उनकी बात से मुझे समझ लगा कि आप probably देखना चाहते हैं कि NUST, how NUST can take action in climate domain. Of course, as a university, मैं चलूँ आगे कि नहीं? चलें, don't worry then. अच्छा, so I picked a topic for myself. That was role of academia in achieving net zero emissions. So it's a very narrow topic. It's not the scientific discourse. And the main चीज़ है कि जो universities हैं, they spearhead research. They are opinion makers. They produce policy makers and scientists. Across society, across disciplines. उनका कैनवस बहुत बड़ा होता है और इकोनॉमी के लिए उनकी जो इनपुट्स हैं, जो उनकी कंट्रीब्यूशन है, वो बहुत ह्यूज होती है. तो जब आप कैंपस लेवल की बात करते हैं तो एक तरफ से आपका लीडरशिप का रोल है इन इंटेलेक्चुअल रेल्म, दूसरी तरफ ये है कि व्हाट इज दैट वी कैन डू इट हियर on a tiny little space called campus. मगर उसमें उसको डिज़ाइन करते हुए जिस कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी की ज़रूरत है क्लाइमेट चेंज की, उसको सिंप्लीफाई करना एक चैलेंज बन जाता है while you are performing your other role. उस सेंस में जो पहला क्वेश्चन था मेरे ज़हन में, जो मैंने पूछने की कोशिश की अपने आप से और स्लाइड में डालना चाह रहा था मैं, कि कैन एकेडेमिया कंट्रीब्यूट टू रेस टू ज़ीरो and net zero emissions. The race to zero was a precursor by the UN that made way for net zero emissions discourse. So many countries, many academic establishments, institutions signed off to race to zero, and many more have now signed off to net zero emissions. And there is a global trend in universities to commit to net zero emissions now. And I say commit to because very few of them have actually accomplished so far. So the leadership position is still open for lumps. You strive harder, you can be top of the class. And several universities have pursued net zero emissions in partnership with industry, with other universities, to help transition of the campus as a model or as a case for the rest of the society in different sectors or different other departments. And I'm very happy. I think Mariam is sitting here, right? I'll be speaking a little bit more about AKU since I talked about partnership with universities. I'll do that. Since you have a leadership role to play as an academic center of excellence, you have at least 4 different categories of leadership that you can exercise. And I hope younger students here can register those in their minds. One is by reducing your own emissions. These are all old-fashioned buildings with duopolies. We are not availing the sunlight that's outside there. So when you think of revisiting, reducing your own emissions, you think about all aspects of activities on campus, including building designs. You research global solutions and bring them home in your own context, not only the campus, but also your city and the neighborhood. You create models and pathways for others. So leadership doesn't come what you have done. Leadership comes in documenting, showcasing, simplifying, converting it into something like ISO 14,000 or something that others could also replicate. Because what you're doing is not inventing a chemical formula that will give you edge in the marketplace. You want to showcase your failures and faster pace, your successes and your slow pace, everything, so that you have a community of practice that evolves in the process. So you will become a living lab, so to speak, if you pursue that. If you, um, so because you'll be testing and upscaling innovative solutions in your own context. And energy will be probably the simplest step forward, an initial step forward. What kind of energy you use and how do you reduce your reliance on fossil fuels. And other climate technologies such as managing waste and paper and so on and so forth. And most importantly, in this realm, when a campus takes the lead, you create your position to leverage your own intellectual capital. Typically on campus, spread across faculties, is dormant capacity that campuses are not able to use. Classroom courses do not always permit that. But once you commit to this, sign off to this journey, then you're capitalizing on the dormant capacity that you have in the faculty, in the management, and in the student body. Revert to that a little bit again. So by now, as of January this year, 1,050 universities have signed off to net zero emissions commitment in 68 countries. And it's a very large number. And it's not just a number. It is essentially who's who of the world, all the renowned and well-regarded universities and campuses have exercised that leadership. If there's a neighborhood university, nobody knows about it, that number could be even 10,000, but it will matter much more if very well-known schools such as yours take the leadership. And this league of 1,000 universities includes all the big names. So you have this opportunity to engage with them on the substantive issues. I'll come to that in a little moment. 15 of these 1,000 have committed to 100% renewable energy by or before 2030. And in my humble view, renewable energy is the cheapest thing, particularly if we continue the process of removing our subsidies on energy. It's the cheapest transition this campus can make because you're not short of space. And you can have off-grid solutions to many of your energy challenges. And some of the faculty members I know can design it within weeks. Your senior management, I hope your chancellors and vice chancellors and the board gets a 1-page or 2-page request in their board meeting, in one of the future board meetings. Put a timeline on that, and that can be accomplished in a relatively short period of time. And that is very easy thing to accomplish as a model for other campuses as well. And remarkably in this country, most of older campuses, be they high schools, be they universities, have plenty of space and playgrounds and rooftops. 17 out of this 1,000 have committed to carbon neutrality. And carbon neutrality you can define very narrowly: on-campus life or activities, or the supply chain. You can be more ambitious. Your management can think in phases and proceed on this. And 2 universities, and please don't ask me their names, it will be a different discussion. 2 universities have already accomplished that. So when this is such a beautiful exercise in a campus where you get very excited, enthusiastic younger generation, young students who can take their term papers and research and come back with answers. Now, I grew up in a country where we are in habit of measuring our height compared to India. So I try to look for some information that I could share with young students today, what is happening in India. As I mentioned, that these 1,000+ universities, most of them are big brand universities. In India, several universities have committed to net zero. Many of them have committed to carbon neutral footprinting of their activities. The leadership was exercised by IIT, Indian Institute of Technology, a gift that Jawaharlal Nehru gave to India that has allowed India to become a player at the global arena. But the leadership has a cost. They started working on it when it was not a very favorite thing for the Indian government or many other campuses, and they have led the campaign in India, in Delhi, and it was the first technical institute that reduced carbon footprint by 50%. So if you have to compare or use a yardstick, look at IIT. Another campus of IIT has banned single-use plastic bottles and encouraged bicycles on campus. You park towards the gate, and from there bikes are available to students. They can go from one building to the other. And I believe this is exactly what LUMS has also done. How successfully, probably people sitting in this room will know better. India's target is by 2070. Global challenges, global commitments are coming for 2030. Increasing non-fuel, non-fossil fuel energy by 500 gigawatt, meeting 50% of energy needs from renewable energy by 2030, and carbon sink of almost 3 billion tons of carbon sink through plantation of trees. And that campaign on your campus, which is such a spacious place, is also a stream of work that can be of interest to you. I mentioned Mariam here. Mariam here is to AKU. From the Pakistani universities, a little bit that I know, they were the first one and perhaps more systematic in their commitment to this. Many others may have been doing it, but my apologies if I don't know a lot about them. They have committed to net zero by 2030. And ma'am, you can correct me wherever I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong, raise your hand and add something more to our collective knowledge. And the statement is very interesting, with one sentence I want to read to you. Net zero by 2030 by addressing emissions hotspots. Quote unquote hotspots. I think you talked about tipping point, Dr. Saab. And that can be a tipping point for a campus if you can address the hotspots. What they've done is initiated a process of measuring carbon footprint and planning decarbonization. So these are very practical steps that I wanted. They have started collecting data from all facilities. They have many facilities. And supply chain. The ambition is bigger, deeper. It's not just the campus. So it's going beyond on supply chain and guiding the supply chain to also reduce their emissions. Ending dependence on anesthetic gases used in surgery, because it's a hospital also. So it's a complexity that may have a counterpart on your campus as well. Decarbonizing process of buildings, a building by building. Small group of students can help audit, and within a week, rough reports can be on a professor's table, and then from there, senior people can sit down and determine their way forward. And investment in renewable energy resources that early on I commented that this is an excellent place for renewable energy. I think you had an excellent project earlier on solid waste management. Doctor, is that right? And then, of course, planting trees. And most importantly, that's where Dr. Cooker finished, a partnership with SDSN, Sustainable Development, whatever network, in New York at Columbia University, if I'm not mistaken, uh, Climate Works Center, as well as Monash University. Now, that kind of partnership with universities or academic institutions abroad uh, fast tracks learning. Monash University, if you visit their website, you will probably see they are sharing lessons and resources I'm underlining, to accelerate the decarbonization of university campuses around the world, providing universities an advantage to be change makers to influence wider change. So Monash is one name. There may be others. Similarly, I think NED University in Karachi is also initiating this process. I was with them regarding this a few months ago, I think in November. And they are initiating with clean energy and reducing waste production, and then moving on to supply chain emissions of their suppliers. Now, I wish I had the screen at this time. Give it another effort, try, ma'am, if it works now. But even if it doesn't, since I tried to make my presentation very operational so that it's useful and generate some ideas for younger students, I listed 12 steps, and I'm gonna read to you, explain to you one by one. Some of them a little bit repetitious, but they are nuanced if I could keep that sense in my mind. Don't worry. First and foremost, who is the senior most person sitting here in this room, if I may ask? Any chancellor, vice chancellor? Who?
Our director research,
Dr. Saab? You're the most important audience for me, because some of those things now you will need to communicate to your colleagues at the senior level. First is assign a sustainability champion at the institution who will map out the work already underway across the university. And unless you or some senior colleague is able to explain to the president and report to the board a couple of times a year, it will not happen. And sir, I'm submitting this based on a little bit of research that I've done. Without the champion who carries it forward, it will not complete. Second, collaborate with higher education institutions across different countries so that the frameworks can be adopted by you. You take lessons from others. So forge some partnerships, reach out to them. You'll write 20 letters and maybe 3 will respond, or maybe no one will, and then you'll go from there. Third, and that perhaps is not less important than number 1, that is bring students, staff, and academia together to identify and test potential. अब मैं आगे कैसे जाऊंगा इस पे? जी आगे कहाँ से आगे, कहाँ से नेक्स्ट करूँगा? Okay, next Next. Okay, hold on there, hold on there. Please go back to the last one, previous. Yes, now we'll work together. Now, it has to be a product of the students, not of the champion. So please bring, if you want to pursue it further, bring students, staff, and academics together. If students' excitement and cheap labor and their innovation and their sense of responsibility and the messages they take to the supply chain, that will give you the result. So people who are not sitting in the first two rows, it'll have to be your project. And then these are business-like things now. Embed activities into teaching programs and staff workloads to ensure that it is recognized. In other words, आपके जो कोर्सेज ऑफर करते हैं उनमें एक आध वीक दो चार लेक्चर मोर और लेस हर कोर्स में आ सकता है so that everybody on campus is sensitized. And just about every young professor and assistant professor and others, उनके वर्कलोड में ये चीज़ आ सकती है कि तुमने एक महीने में इतने दिन इस चीज़ का काम करना है, ये इतने स्टूडेंट्स को सुपरवाइज करना है. So ये वर्कलोड शेयरिंग, otherwise your champion sitting here, Honorable Director Saab, will not be able to manage that if he has to do and supervise everything. Now, oftentimes we think work is good enough without data. And this is a scientific institution, we'll have to compile data. I gave you example of Aga Khan. It may sound redundant, it may sound incomplete, many a times it will not work. You go and ask the admin officers to give you their electricity bills or water consumption bills, they'll not have it ready, it's extra work for them. आपको उनकी मिन्नतें करनी पड़ेंगी, उनको निकलवाना पड़ेगा किसी ना किसी, और लड़ाई झगड़े से कभी आपको नहीं मिलेगा. You need the support. So all the data that you can get, and I gave you one very small example, and there may be many other examples that we will need to work on to create a baseline, and then comparing that baseline with regular intervals of if you're making any progress or not. And if you're making any progress, recognize heroes. If you're not, try to understand where the bottlenecks are and try to remove them. Next. Well, many of you, I suppose you will have campus newsletters. I think many faculty members write in newspapers and professional journals. It doesn't matter if you write a premature note in a scientific journal that this is what we are trying to do and this is the methodology we are adopting. Advertising commits you, but it also educates others and creates momentum for you. And university research on net zero is crucial for informing and developing the policy. Your audience is not only the management that wants to see how much electricity bill has been reduced, but your audience is also sitting in federal or provincial government policy making units where you say, this is what we are doing. You convene a meeting and we can come and share our case study with 20 other universities through HEC or whatever the forums they may have. And that will help exercise your you can leverage your own intellectual capital because many of you are expert in many of these areas, and your proposals, funding proposal that you submit can bring this element in. And that in fact can add to, in fact there's a point here probably, point 9 is also to use that as a tool for recruitment. अगर बच्चों को पता चले who are in their early 20s, it's a carbon neutral campus, you are certainly more attractive than your competitors. बच्चों की जो fascination है climate change के साथ, उनका जो inclination है to be activist, to be supportive, is much higher than my age groups. And that will also help you attract more qualified university in climate change arena, get more financing or funds also in this. I should not belabor the point. I think it's there. Next. Now, last 2 or 3 points in this regard. This is an investment. There is a return on this investment also. Please don't think you're doing a favor to anybody else. If I'm the president of your university, I'll know that this is what I'll be getting out of it. In concrete, जैसे कहते हैं, not in social return and financial return on these investments. And timelines have to be realistic. Anything that seems simple doesn't mean it can be done this week or this semester. अपने timelines को बेशक stretch करें, मगर they should mean it. You should not allow them to slip. The accountability has to be there. And that accountability begins before the cut-off date. So उसके बारे में real planning करने की जरूरत है, and professors can be very good at this. So if you can be one of the first ones to reduce your own greenhouse gas emissions, many other campuses can come. And I think that as a back of envelope calculation can be done, that because of your initiative, 200 campuses in Pakistan are working on this, and that means X number of tons over X number of years. So you take credit for that work that is going to happen 10 years down the line, but you have spurred and you have been catalytical in this regard. I think this was my last slide. Check कीजिएगा. Next. I'm open to any questions. My apologies if it sounds very bazaar or bazari to you. It's a very esteemed academic institution. They are high priests of science, guide us, and we look forward to their guidance. But if you wish to make climate action as an orientation, like charity, climate action begins at home. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, and apologies for the technical issue. Now I would like to invite Director Research, Dr. Hamoud Rahman, to kindly come on stage and give shields to our prestigious speakers. Firstly, I would request Dr. Fahim Khokhar to kindly receive his shield. Mr. Ali Tawheed, kindly receive your shield. Thank you, everyone. It's time for a short break. We will meet after 10 minutes. Thank you. We will proceed downstairs for the tea.